Imagine, if you can, the silence. The deafening, soul-crushing silence of my 65th birthday. A day that was meant to sparkle with long-awaited happiness, a beacon of joy I hadn't felt in years, a chance to truly feel seen again. Instead, I sat utterly alone, while my precious family, my son, his wife, my grandchild, basked on sun-drenched beaches, funded by my nest egg. I'd cooked. I'd dressed in my finest. I'd waited with a heart full of hope. But the events of that particular day didn't just hurt. They scorched every illusion I held about those closest to me. I may have decades behind me, but my spirit is far from dim, and my hands, though wrinkled, are anything but helpless. Before I pull back the curtain on the saga, let me just express my deepest gratitude that you're here, lending an ear to a story that's been burning a hole in my soul. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Connecting with you truly lights up my day. And if you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It's a small gesture that supports me more than words can say. Now, let's peel back the layers and uncover the bitter truth of what really happened. I'd clung to the promise of that trip for nearly a year, each passing month a slow countdown. It began last February, when my son, Michael, called, his voice brimming with excitement. "Mom, we're orchestrating something truly spectacular for your 65th, he'd announced, a genuine escape, a slice of paradise somewhere warm. Just pack your prettiest sundresses, leave every other detail to us." My grin stretched so wide that morning, I almost fumbled my coffee cup. It had been an eternity since I'd stepped foot outside my predictable routine of church and pharmacy runs. The memory of sand between my toes, the scent of salty air, those were ghosts from a life before my beloved Robert passed. When I tentatively broached the subject of expenses, Michael simply brushed it off with a dismissive wave. "You dedicated your life to work, didn't you, Mom? You utterly deserve this. Consider it handled." Barely a week later, he casually inquired about borrowing my credit card. "Just to secure the absolute best rates and lock in those group flight tickets," he'd chirped. A flicker of hesitation crossed my mind, but my trust in my boy ran deeper than any doubt. I handed it over, my questions unspoken, my faith unwavering. He continuously reiterated that our departure would be in late April, early May. As April melted into May without a word, I cautiously inquired about the precise date. "We're just aligning our schedules," he'd promised, his voice smooth. "It will absolutely coincide with your birthday." A sacred promise. And foolishly, I believed him. I even bought a brand new lavender-colored suitcase on a whim, on sale, its shiny newness a tangible symbol of the adventure to come. I kept it perched by the front door, the retail tag still flapping, a constant, cheerful reminder. Over 2 weeks, I slowly, lovingly filled it, my favorite linen dress, adorned with a vibrant hibiscus print, my comfortable church sandals, a wide-brimmed sun hat I hadn't touched in almost a decade. I even tucked in Robert's old monogrammed handkerchief, a small, worn square of fabric that made me feel as if his spirit, too, would be journeying with us. But then, on the very eve of my 65th birthday, the phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was breathless, almost strained, as if he were driving at high speed. "Mom, I utterly despise having to say this, but the trip, it's been slightly delayed," he announced, the words slicing through the quiet anticipation in my heart. My own heart plummeted, a lead weight dropping into an empty well. "Oh! For how long?" I managed, trying desperately to keep my voice light. "Not for long, maybe a couple more weeks. Just some unexpected snags on our end." "Oh, all right," I replied, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "So, I'll at least get to see you tomorrow for dinner?" There was a noticeable, uncomfortable pause. "Of course, Mom," he finally replied, the words a little too quick, a little too smooth. "Wouldn't dream of missing it." "We'll swing by, no doubt." That flimsy assurance was enough for me to cling to. I swallowed my growing disappointment. Plans change, life gets chaotic, I told myself, a mantra I'd repeated countless times. At least I'd see their faces. So, on the morning of my 65th birthday, I rose before the sun, the pre-dawn quiet broken only by the melodic strains of my favorite gospel hymns. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as I began to orchestrate a feast: golden fried chicken, creamy candied yams, a bubbling macaroni and cheese, and vibrant green beans simmered with rich smoked turkey. I even baked a deep, velvety chocolate fudge pie from scratch, using real, decadent cocoa, not the powdered imitation. For this special occasion, I even retrieved the heirloom china from the highest cabinet, the delicate set with the shimmering silver leaf trim that only saw the light of day on the grandest holidays. I meticulously set the table for 5, myself, Michael, his wife Jessica, their daughter Sophia, and perhaps Daniel from next door if they decided to bring him a plate. I donned my favorite sapphire blue floral dress, the one Robert always swore made me look a decade younger, its soft fabric flowing as I moved. I carefully curled my hair, adding a touch of subtle plum lipstick. I lit the tall, elegant candles I usually reserved for Christmas Eve dinner. By 5 p.m., my home hummed with the fragrant warmth of love and anticipation. By 6 o'clock, a chilling tendril of worry began to coil in my stomach. By 7 o'clock, I had reheated every dish twice, the steam gently fogging the kitchen windows. By 8 o'clock, I finally gave up checking the window, my hope dwindling with each passing minute. By 9 o'clock, I was seated at that perfectly set table, utterly, heartbreakingly alone. The once tall candles had melted into puddles of wax, the food was stone cold, my lipstick smudged from countless nervous bites of my lip. I stared at the empty chairs opposite me, desperately constructing excuses: a sudden emergency, a forgotten appointment, a baby crisis, a car breakdown, a dead phone. But in my heart, a terrible, undeniable truth bloomed: no one was coming. My hand trembled as I lifted the fork. The food had lost all flavor, tasting only of ash and disappointment. I managed a few bites, then pushed the plate away, resting my weary elbows on the table. My gaze fell upon the birthday card I'd picked out for myself at the dollar store just last week. It proudly declared, "Still radiant, still royal." When I bought it, it had felt sweet, a little wink of self-affirmation. Now it mocked me, a cruel, sarcastic jest. The tears came then, not the loud, dramatic sobs of a heartbroken child, but the quiet, agonizing kind that seep from your soul when you've held back too much, for too long. My shoulders shook with silent grief. I wiped my face with the edge of the tablecloth, letting the profound silence of my empty house consume me. No calls, no texts, not even a hurried, "Happy birthday, Mom." Around 10:30, I carefully wrapped the chocolate pie in foil, stored the untouched feast in the refrigerator, and extinguished the lonely candles. I changed into my oldest nightgown, its familiar softness a thin comfort. I sat on the edge of my bed, my eyes fixed on the lavender suitcase by the door, still packed, still waiting, a silent monument to a broken promise. I turned off the light and lay down, the ache in my knees a little sharper, a little more insistent than usual. I stared at the slow, rhythmic turning of the ceiling fan, the gentle whish of its blades the only sound in the suffocating quiet. I folded my hands over my stomach and whispered into the darkness, perhaps they truly forgot. I tried to believe it, clung to that fragile hope. But somewhere deep, deep down, I knew with a chilling certainty, they hadn't forgotten. They simply hadn't cared enough to come. That knowledge was a wound that cut deeper than any physical pain. The morning after my 65th birthday, I awoke to a house steeped in a profound stillness. Not the peaceful quiet of a restful slumber, but the echoing emptiness of abandonment. For a long time, I sat on the edge of my bed, my gaze drawn to that small, innocent lavender suitcase, packed and repacked countless times over weeks, its tag still dangling untouched, a silent testament to a journey that never materialized. A stubborn, hopeful part of me still wanted to believe Michael's flimsy excuse, that the trip was merely delayed, that it would eventually happen, that I simply needed to cultivate more patience. I moved through my morning rituals like a marionette, brushing my teeth, carefully tying my silk scarf, shuffling into the kitchen in my worn, comfortable slippers. But every action felt heavy, sluggish, as if I were wading through a dream. I made a cup of herbal tea, but the thought of drinking it felt insurmountable. I opened the refrigerator, stared at the untouched chocolate pie, and closed the door again. The energy to warm up leftovers was simply absent. The dishes from last night's solitary feast still loomed in the sink, a silent accusation. I didn't touch them. I retreated to the living room, wrapping myself tightly in Robert's old knit shawl, its familiar scent of cedar and aged lavender a bittersweet comfort. I stared at the scuffed floorboards for what felt like an eternity, listening only to the relentless tick-tock of the antique clock on the wall. It was almost noon, and still no calls, no texts. Not even a quick, "So sorry we missed you, Mom." I clung to that last, desperate sliver of hope that perhaps today, they would remember, they would reach out, that maybe, just maybe, they had simply gotten the date wrong. Then, a soft, tentative knock, 3 gentle taps, broke through the suffocating quiet. I rose slowly, my joints aching, and peered through the lace curtain. It was Ethan, a kind young man from 2 doors down, always polite, always checking on me. His grandmother, God bless her, had raised him right. I opened the door. "Hey, Miss Evelyn," he said, a genuine smile on his face as he held a plastic grocery bag. "Got you that extra-strength citrus cleaner you mentioned." "Oh, bless your heart," I said, stepping aside. "Come on in, dear." He walked in and placed the bag on the counter. I was just about to offer him some iced tea when his eyes landed on my phone, resting innocently on the kitchen table. "You still having trouble with your apps, Miss Evelyn?" he asked, picking it up. I nodded. "It's been freezing up again. You know how I am with that thing. I press the wrong button and everything just vanishes." Ethan chuckled kindly. "Let me take a look." He settled at the table, his fingers deftly swiping through the phone settings. I returned to wiping down the counters, just to give my trembling hands something to do. Then I heard him pause. "Miss Evelyn," he said gently, his voice unexpectedly somber, "did you say your son was planning to take you on a trip for your birthday?" I turned towards him slowly, my stomach clenching. "Yes," I whispered. "He said it was going to be a family vacation. But the night before my birthday, he called and said it was postponed." "Why?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the phone. He hesitated, then glanced up at me, his eyes filled with a sorrowful understanding. "I didn't mean to pry," he began, "but I follow your granddaughter, Sophia, on social media." I frowned. "Okay." He slowly flipped the phone around, and there it was, glaringly obvious. A sun-drenched beach, pristine white sand, turquoise water, and right in the center, my family, Michael, his wife Jessica, and Sophia, all beaming, wearing matching t-shirts that boldly proclaimed, "Winter Family Vacation." They were tanned, clutching exotic fruit drinks, posing jubilantly in front of a giant, shimmering hotel pool. The caption below read, "Much needed reset. Soaking up the sun. #family goals, #no drama just sunshine." It had been posted the night before, on my birthday. I stared at the photo, frozen, my mouth agape, but no sound escaped. Slowly, I reached out and took the phone from Ethan's hand, zooming in, my fingers trembling. This wasn't just a quick getaway, it was a lavish, full-blown vacation. Resorts with endless amenities, opulent dinners, indulgent spa days. I scrolled to the next post, Jessica twirling in a designer sundress, a champagne flute raised in triumph. Another showed Michael, roaring with laughter, a fat cigar perched between his fingers. There was even a shot of Sophia, proudly displaying a brand-new diamond-studded bracelet on her wrist. I scrolled and scrolled, photo after photo, a relentless, glittering parade of their joy. But no mention of me, not a single, solitary word. Ethan sat silently beside me, his presence a quiet, comforting anchor. I could tell he was at a loss for words. I swallowed the painful lump in my throat, forcing it down, and gently placed the phone back on the table. They told me it was postponed, I whispered, the words barely audible, infused with a raw disbelief. Said we'd reschedule. Said they'd come by for dinner. I felt the familiar burn behind my eyes just before the tears cascaded down. I blinked furiously, trying desperately to hold them back, but it was useless. My shoulders trembled uncontrollably. I pressed my hands flat against the table, trying to steady myself, to find some anchor in the swirling chaos of betrayal. They abandoned me, I choked out. They truly abandoned me. Ethan got up and knelt beside me, his voice a soft, gentle comfort. I am so incredibly sorry, Miss Evelyn. I had no idea. If I had known, I would have. It's not your fault, dear, I interrupted, wiping my cheeks with the back of my hand, the wetness cold against my skin. It's mine, for daring to believe them. He didn't argue. He simply sat with me, a quiet, unwavering presence in my utter despair. And in that moment, the bitter irony of it all struck me, how a young man who owed me nothing could sit with me in my deepest anguish, while the very ones I had nurtured, clothed, and fed, had cast me aside as if I were utterly inconsequential. After he finally left, I sat in the suffocating silence for what felt like an eternity. Then, a tiny spark ignited deep within me. A fierce, unyielding resolve. I needed to know the full truth. I powered on my old, sluggish computer and logged into my email. I hadn't dared to check it in weeks. Michael always insisted I shouldn't bother, claiming he handled all the bills and bookings through his account. But I remembered one obscure password, and that was all I needed. I typed reservation into the search bar, my fingers trembling. The very first result made my heart seize in my chest. An email from a luxurious resort in Cancun. A booking confirmation. A full week. An ocean view suite. Exclusive spa add-ons. All paid in advance. Billing address. Evelyn Jenkins. Credit card. Mine. The exact same card Michael had asked to borrow for emergencies just last month. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking so violently the mouse slipped from my grasp. My stomach twisted into a painful, nauseating knot. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had used me. They had exploited my money, shamelessly lied to my face, stolen the vacation they'd promised me, toasted to a new chapter in their lives, and left me to drown in my own tears over a cold, forgotten slice of pie. I slammed the laptop shut, pushed my chair back with a harsh scrape, and rose to my feet. I walked to the hallway mirror, the same one Robert had lovingly hung when we first moved into this house, and looked at my reflection. I no longer saw a fragile old woman. I saw a mother who had been cruelly taken for granted. A woman who had been silent, patiently enduring, for far too long. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, something profound shifted inside me. Not bitterness. Not hatred. Just absolute, terrifying, exhilarating clarity. After the chilling discovery of that booking email, something inside me went eerily quiet. Not numb, no, just profoundly still, as if my very soul had settled into a deep, watchful calm. I didn't immediately call Michael. I didn't fire off angry texts. I certainly didn't start slamming drawers or throwing objects across the room. That's simply not my way. I just stood there in my hallway, staring at my reflection in the old mirror, the very one Robert had chosen when we first made this house our home. I looked at myself long and hard, unflinchingly. I saw every etched wrinkle, every faint freckle, every smile line that now curved into something far more somber. But strangely, I didn't feel weak. I felt undeniably awake. The following afternoon, my phone chimed. It was Jessica. Her voice was saccharine sweet, almost sickly so, as if nothing remotely unpleasant had ever occurred. She cheerfully informed me they were back in town and oh so sorry they'd missed your big day, Miss Evelyn, as if my phone number hadn't been readily available to them all week. Then, she added, Michael's planning to swing by later and bring you something special. I offered no response, just a clipped, all right, before calmly ending the call. And sure enough, Michael appeared that evening, right around 6 p.m. He didn't even bother to knock, he simply strode in, just as he had since his teenage years. I was in the kitchen, meticulously folding a stack of dish towels, trying to find solace in the mundane. I didn't even glance up. "Hey, Mom," he said, his tone overly casual, as if he'd just popped out for groceries. "We brought you this." He placed a small, rather fancy white paper bag on the kitchen island. Inside, nestled carefully, was a single slice of gourmet carrot cake, wrapped as if it were a precious wedding favor, not a meager apology for a missed birthday. I looked at the cake. Then, very slowly, I lifted my gaze to him. "Is that what you brought back from Cancun?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of warmth. His practiced smile flickered, a tiny crack in his facade, for just a fraction of a second. Then, he chuckled, a nervous, forced sound. "Oh, so you saw the photos." I saw everything, I stated, my eyes fixed on his. The exotic drinks, the lavish hotel, the matching t-shirts, the glittering diamond bracelet on Sophia's wrist, the exquisite steak dinners. All of it, all enjoyed on my 65th birthday. Michael scratched the back of his neck, a telltale nervous gesture, and offered a dismissive shrug. "Mom, we genuinely didn't think you'd want to go all that way. You get tired easily, you know." "That's not what you told me," I countered, my voice still eerily calm, though I could feel a slow, simmering heat building deep in my chest. "You told me it was postponed." "We just changed the plans last minute," he mumbled, trying to wave it away. "It wasn't that deep." I slowly, deliberately stepped around the kitchen island. My voice remained perfectly calm, but the heat in my chest was now a roaring inferno. "You used my credit card, Michael. You funded the entire trip. In my name." His head snapped back as if I had delivered a physical blow. "What?" "It wasn't like that. You gave me the card for emergencies. I figured you'd be fine with it once you saw how much we enjoyed ourselves." "You figured?" I repeated, my voice rising a fraction, dripping with incredulity. "You figured your mother, who cooked a full birthday meal and set a formal table, dressed in her best on her 65th birthday, would be fine with being lied to, deliberately excluded, and forced to pay for her own abandonment?" Michael's face contorted in an expression of pure annoyance now. "Honestly, Mom, it was just one birthday. You've had 64 of them already." My hands trembled, a barely controlled tremor. I gripped the cool edge of the counter, my knuckles white. "One birthday," I said, the words barely a whisper, yet infused with an unexpected, fierce power. "It was the first birthday I've had since your father passed. And I thought, just perhaps, you might want to spend it with me. Not run from me." He groaned dramatically, dropping into a nearby chair as if utterly exhausted by my perceived melodrama. "You are being utterly dramatic," he snapped. I blinked, stunned by his audacity. "Dramatic?" "Yes," he continued, his voice rising in exasperation. "It's not like we left you with nothing. You had food. You always say you don't need much. Why is this suddenly some massive crisis?" I stepped back, my heart pounding a furious drumbeat against my ribs. I thought about the countless nights I cradled him when he had fevers, how I silently skipped my own meals so he could eat, how I once, decades ago, secretly pawned my precious wedding ring to afford his braces. I remembered praying every single night for his safety when he was out too late, how he used to drift off to sleep on my lap during thunderstorms, calling me his favorite person in the entire world. And now here he was, telling me I had enough, dismissing my profound pain as too much trouble. I slowly sat down across from him, staring directly into the cold, calculating eyes of the man I had raised. "I'm your mother, Michael," I said, my voice low, firm. "Not your personal ATM." He offered no reply. This time, I didn't cry. Not in front of him. I simply stood up again and walked deliberately to the pantry, pulling out my old, well-used broom. "You can leave," I said softly, my back to him. He looked up, startled. "Mom." "I need to sweep," I interrupted, my voice devoid of emotion, "and I don't like sweeping around things that don't belong in my house." He rose slowly, and for a fleeting second, he looked as if he wanted to say something, anything. But his lips remained sealed. He turned and walked out, without another word, the sound of the door closing behind him echoing like a final, definitive period. That night, I sat on the porch, bathed in the soft, twinkling glow of the string lights Robert and I had hung up years ago. I rocked gently back and forth in my favorite chair, a worn blanket wrapped securely around my shoulders. I didn't cry, but a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. I simply let the cool night air caress my face, listening to the crickets sing a quiet, merciful lullaby. I still loved my son, undeniably. But I couldn't unsee what I had seen, and I couldn't unfeel the depth of the betrayal. I had initially thought this was the end, that perhaps, in time, we'd talk again, and like all good mothers, I'd smooth things over. But something far more significant was brewing, something that would force me to see everything with an even sharper clarity. And this time, I wouldn't dare look away. I wasn't actively seeking trouble. I simply needed a little help. Weeks after the emotional confrontation with Michael, my financial situation tightened, more acutely than usual. My grocery supply dwindled, and the utility bill arrived, surprisingly steep. I didn't panic. I'd navigated far rougher waters in my life. I simply intended to borrow a small sum to tide me over until my next pension deposit. Ethan, bless his kind and thoughtful heart, had mentioned a retired judge who volunteered at the local community center, Justice Eleanor Vance. "She champions older women, Miss Evelyn," he'd explained, offering legal counsel and vital support. "She's incredibly sharp, doesn't mince words, but you'll genuinely admire her." Despite my usual reluctance to impose, I made the call. She arrived the following afternoon, a tall, imposing woman with beautifully coiffed silver-gray twists, piercing, intelligent eyes, and a no-nonsense voice that somehow still conveyed profound compassion. She entered my home dressed in impeccably tailored slacks and sensible flat shoes, carrying a substantial canvas tote overflowing with legal folders. "Miss Jenkins," she said, extending a firm, confident hand, "I understand you required some assistance." "Just a touch of guidance," I replied, gesturing for her to take a seat in my most comfortable armchair. "I may need to borrow a few dollars, simply to bridge a gap. I'm not behind on anything, just a challenging month." She gave me a penetrating, yet not unkind, look. "Do you mind if I inquire? Do you not possess a retirement account? Any savings?" I nodded slowly. "I do. I did. But my son has been diligently managing it for me." She set her weighty tote bag down with a soft thud. "And precisely how involved are you in that management?" I hesitated, my gaze dropping to my clasped hands. "He holds the login details. He handles the bill payments. He always said he'd take care of all the tedious financial matters so I wouldn't have to fret." Eleanor leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Would you be willing to access your online banking? Just a quick glance, to ensure everything is precisely where it should be." I desperately wished to avoid embarrassing myself, to expose my own financial naivete, but something in her calm, authoritative tone compelled me to comply. So I opened my old, clunky laptop and allowed her to sit beside me. It took a few fumbling attempts, but I finally navigated my way into the account. I saw it even before she uttered a single word. The balance was undeniably, terribly wrong. She scrolled silently, her eyes meticulously scanning the screen, not speaking yet. I sat beside her, my heart hammering against my ribs, watching her face for any flicker of emotion. When she finally turned to me, her voice was not that of a stern judge, but of a woman who had witnessed far too many similar tragedies. Miss Jenkins, she said gently, using my first name for the first time, your account has been systematically emptied over the past year. We're talking about numerous, substantial withdrawals, thousands upon thousands of dollars, primarily funneled into a secondary account. An icy dread permeated my entire being. That must be Michael's, I whispered, barely audible. He's been taking care of things. She tapped a slender finger against a specific line on the screen. Observe this. Purchases from high-end jewelry stores, luxury resort charges, expensive electronics, even some payments mysteriously labeled consulting services. Yet, every single transaction is routed through his personal account, not a legitimate business entity. This, Evelyn, is not help. This is blatant financial exploitation. My throat tightened, a painful knot forming. He's just been under immense pressure, I stammered, desperately clinging to a fading hope. He told me things were tight. He's striving to build something. Eleanor met my gaze, her expression neither cruel nor judgmental, but simply unvarnished, brutal truth. Evelyn, she said, her voice firm but imbued with a profound empathy, you are not a bank. And you are not here to be drained dry, smiling through your own silent agony. You are worth far more than how he is treating you. You nurtured him. You worked tirelessly. You do not owe him everything you possess. I sat utterly motionless, my hands clasped so tightly they ached with the strain. She gently closed the laptop. You expressed a desire for help. I can provide that help. But only if you are truly prepared to stop allowing your innate kindness to be weaponized as a weakness. I didn't answer immediately. I looked down at the worn kitchen tiles, the same ones I had spent countless hours scrubbing on my knees. I thought about the years I meticulously saved every receipt, how I forgave myself for skipping my own hair appointments so Michael could have brand new football cleats, how I never once let him see the raw fear that gnawed at me when money ran thin. I thought about how I had waited on my birthday for a dinner that never materialized, and how the very people I had poured my entire being into had used my money to clink glasses under swaying palm trees. I don't want to hurt him, I whispered, the words heavy with a reluctant sorrow. You're not, she countered, her voice unwavering. He's already hurting you. We didn't finish the conversation that day. I needed time. Time to mourn the shattered ideal of my son. Eleanor understood completely. She simply left me her card and instructed me to call her if anything else surfaced. It didn't take long, because the very next week, Michael appeared at my door again, a wide, predatory smile plastered across his face. Hey, Mom, he announced, stepping across my threshold without waiting for an invitation, a casual confidence radiating from him. Got some fantastic news. I've located a house, a genuine diamond in the rough, brimming with potential. I'm rushing to submit an offer before someone else snatches it up. My eyebrows rose in silent query. Oh! He made himself comfortable at my kitchen table, as if it were his rightful domain. I need about $50,000 to secure the down payment. I figured, maybe you could advance me a portion of my inheritance now, before it's too late. That was it. That was the precise moment. The air evacuated my lungs like a brutal punch to the gut. I looked him dead in the eye. He didn't even flinch. He genuinely, wholeheartedly believed he was entitled to every scrap of the life I had meticulously built. I don't possess that kind of money, I stated, my voice remarkably steady, almost devoid of inflection. He leaned back, a smug smirk twisting his lips. Of course you do. You just don't want to help. My voice remained flat, but a sharp edge had crept in. You've been helping yourself, Michael. I've seen the charges. His expression shifted instantly, morphing into a mask of righteous indignation. Excuse me. I saw the resort charges. The luxury jewelry. The high-end electronics. You've been systematically draining my account. He abruptly stood, his posture bristling with indignation. You went through my personal belongings? No, I said calmly, rising to meet his gaze. I went through mine. He scoffed, a sneer twisting his features. So what? You're cutting me off now? After everything I've done for you? You mean using me? I countered, stepping closer, my voice gaining a quiet force. Lying to me? Leaving me alone on my birthday while you drank and danced on my dime. You do this, he snapped, his voice rising. You're going to end up utterly alone. Don't even think about calling me when you need something. I walked to the counter, picked up Eleanor's card, its crisp edges a tangible symbol of my resolve, and looked him directly in the eye. I won't. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him with such force that the framed photograph of Robert on the shelf rattled violently. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the profound silence settle back into the house. Then I picked up my phone, and I called the woman who had helped me reclaim my truth. Eleanor, I said, my voice clear, resolute. Let's begin. The ripple effect reached him swiftly. The very same week, Eleanor efficiently helped me transfer my accounts, meticulously lock down my credit, and unequivocally revoke Michael's access to all my financial affairs. The calls began immediately, a relentless volley of Michael Jenkins missed call notifications. Then came the texts, terse, agitated, laced with barely concealed panic. Mom, we need to talk. Why is my card being declined? Call me now. This is serious. I didn't respond. I didn't need to anymore. Eleanor had explained that while the full legal paperwork would take a few days to finalize, the instant the accounts were frozen, Michael would undoubtedly feel the sting. And he did. I vividly pictured him standing in some checkout line, perhaps at an exclusive boutique or a high-end car dealership, attempting to use my card, only to be met with the humiliating declaration that it was no longer valid. I imagined his eyes narrowing in disbelief, his voice rising in impotent rage. I pictured the cold panic blooming in his chest when he realized his usual bank login was useless. For the first time in an eternity, I felt no guilt, only an intoxicating sense of liberation. But, as always, freedom has its price and its final, inevitable knock at the door. Saturday morning, around 10 a.m., I was methodically folding fresh-scented laundry, the gentle hum of the dryer a soft backdrop to my newfound peace, when I heard the unmistakable heavy thud of familiar shoes on my porch. Before I could even approach the curtain, the front door burst open and Michael strode in, loud and steaming, his face a thundercloud of raw fury. What in God's name is going on? He roared, his voice shaking the quiet air. I remained perfectly calm. I had rehearsed this precise moment in my mind every single night since I made that pivotal call to Eleanor. I met his furious gaze directly and said, "You'll need to be more precise." He scoffed, a harsh, contemptuous sound. "My business account is frozen. My banking apps are locked. The credit card I relied on for utilities just got declined at the gas station. Are you deliberately trying to humiliate me, Mom?" "I am trying to safeguard what is mine," I stated, my voice a soft counterpoint to his rage. He stepped closer, his body language aggressive. "You're really going to do this to your own son?" "No," I said softly, steadily. "You already did it to me." Jessica walked in behind him then. She wasn't dressed in her usual meticulously put-together style. No high heels, no form-fitting blouse, no shimmering lip gloss. Just a wrinkled hoodie and a taut, rigid jaw. "I told you this was going to explode," she muttered to Michael, loud enough for my ears. Michael whirled on her, his face contorted in a snarl. "Stay out of it." "No," I interjected, cutting him off, my voice gaining strength. "Let her speak. I'd be fascinated to hear what narratives you two spun for yourselves while you were clinking glasses on my birthday, using my money." Jessica folded her arms defensively across her chest, her gaze darting away, unable to meet my eyes. Michael, however, didn't flinch. "We needed assistance, Mom. The business wasn't blossoming as we'd hoped. You always taught me your money was for family." "My money was designated for emergencies," I corrected, stepping forward, my voice rising with a quiet intensity. "For groceries, for crucial medicine, perhaps for a grandchild's college fund, not for extravagant island vacations and designer handbags and gourmet dinners I was never invited to." We were always going to repay it. Michael insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. When? I demanded, the heat in my chest now a full-blown blaze. When I'm 6 feet under. After the funeral? When the house is finally sold. Michael's face flushed a deep, mottled red. Don't you dare say that. Why not? I snapped, the words hot and sharp. You've already spent like I was dead. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, laden with years of unspoken resentment. He finally broke it, his voice low, steeped in bitter resentment. You've always made everything more difficult than it needed to be. And you've always made promises you never honored, I retorted, the words a quiet sting. You promised to be here on my birthday. You promised we'd travel together. You promised I would never again feel forgotten. I could see something shift in his eyes then, a subtle, chilling realization. Not guilt, not sorrow. Just the dawning knowledge that I would not bend this time. So what now? He asked, his voice flat, defeated. You going to cut us off entirely? I didn't answer him. I simply walked to the small, ornate drawer near the dining room, pulled out a folded, official-looking letter, and laid it deliberately on the table. What's that? He asked, his voice laced with a newfound wariness. My last will and testament, I stated, my voice clear and precise. Drawn up just last week. Every single penny of my estate is now bequeathed to a women's shelter downtown. The one specifically established to help older women reclaim their lives after being used and manipulated by the very people they loved most. He blinked, stunned, his jaw hanging slightly agape. You're cutting me out of your will? You cut yourself out, I replied, my gaze unwavering, the day you looked me in the eye and saw a financial asset instead of a mother. Jessica was openly weeping now, quiet sobs racking her frame. She clutched her purse tightly and began backing slowly towards the door. I truly didn't know it went that deep, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. I thought you were all right with it. Michael's head snapped towards her. You knew. I said nothing. Sometimes, silence speaks volumes louder and clearer than any words ever could. She left without another sound. Michael stood there a moment longer, his jaw clenched, his mind undoubtedly racing, desperate to find some angle, some argument, that might sway me back. But there was nothing left to say. He finally turned and walked out, slamming the door with such violent force that the framed photograph of Robert on the shelf vibrated violently. I walked over and carefully straightened it. Then I sat down at the table, looked at the half-folded laundry, and let out a soft, almost imperceptible laugh. Not because any of it was funny, but because the sound of strength returning to your very bones, after years of silent anguish, can feel like the purest form of joy. For so long, I had mistakenly believed that my love had to manifest as endless sacrifice, that being a good mother meant giving until nothing was left of me. But now I knew better. I wasn't empty. I wasn't confused. I was simply done being their foundation, a mere stepping stone, while they climbed over me to construct magnificent castles where I was never, ever invited. And for the first time in decades, I looked around my quiet home and felt something profoundly liberating. It all belonged to me again. Every single corner. A year drifted by, quietly, gracefully, like the slow, deliberate blossoming of spring through hardened, winter-cold soil. I won't pretend it was easy. Some days were undeniably challenging, the kind where you sit by the window, a cup of tea cooling beside you, and wonder if perhaps you were too harsh, if maybe you should have answered that fleeting phone call. But then, I would vividly recall the piercing ache in my chest when I first saw that damning Cancun photograph, the casual audacity with which Michael had looked me in the eye and requested an advance on my own death. The raw sting of sitting utterly alone at my birthday table in a dress I had carefully ironed just for them. So no, I didn't pick up. Not when Michael called, for weeks after the accounts were firmly locked. Not when he sent that single, terse, punctuation-less text that simply read, "So it's like that." Yes, it was precisely like that. Because when I finally seized control of my money, my name, my entire future, it felt like pulling myself from a deep, suffocating well I hadn't even realized I was drowning in. Eleanor meticulously helped me put every single detail into place. We formally filed the extensive paperwork to transfer all my assets unequivocally out of Michael's reach. We systematically revoked every single authorization he had ever claimed to possess. We reported numerous suspicious charges, and to my sheer astonishment, some were even refunded. She even connected me with a brilliant financial advisor, a woman who spoke to me not as if I were slow or simple, but as a discerning woman who understood the true, profound value of every dime she had ever touched. Then, together, we completely rewrote my will. Every dollar, every bond, every single piece of land I still owned was irrevocably assigned to a new foundation that builds housing and offers crucial legal aid for older women who have been manipulated or silenced by the very families they loved most. I told no one about this profound decision, save for Eleanor and Ethan. Yes, Ethan. That remarkable young man checked on me diligently every single week after everything fell apart. Sometimes, he'd just bring a loaf of freshly baked bread or patiently adjust my television remote. Other times, he would simply sit and listen as I recounted stories of Robert or reminisced about how I used to sew elaborate prom dresses for half the block. He never once asked for a thing. He never once assumed he was owed anything. So, when my 66th birthday dawned, I didn't set the table for ghosts. I reserved the intimate, sunlit room at the community center. I ordered food, not extravagant, just real, comforting Southern fare, crispy fried chicken, creamy red beans and rice, perfectly seasoned deviled eggs, and a rich pound cake with a bright, tangy lemon glaze. I wore a vibrant, golden yellow dress that made my eyes sparkle with a renewed light, a quiet radiance. And I invited the very people who had genuinely shown up for me when I was at my absolute lowest. Ethan was the first to arrive, carrying 24 glorious roses and a Bluetooth speaker gently playing the soulful hymns of Mahalia Jackson. Eleanor came next, in her sharp, tailored suit, and that wise, knowing smile that promised both strength and understanding. Then came the ladies from the foundation, some leaning on elegant canes, some with their adorable grandchildren in tow, all of them dressed with an air of quiet dignity, like royalty. We laughed. We danced. We passed around slices of pound cake and shared stories, each one a testament to resilience and healing. And Sophia showed up. Yes, Sophia. She entered quietly, no dramatic flourish, just a soft, hesitant knock on the door and a humble birthday card clutched in her hand. She wasn't adorned in designer labels or anything ostentatious, no new bracelets, no perfectly styled hair. She looked nervous, almost vulnerable. "Grandma," she said, standing by the door, her voice a thin, shaky whisper. I truly didn't know what they were doing. I really didn't. Daddy said you didn't want to travel, that you were too tired. I believed him. But then, I saw the receipts later, and the truth. I am so sorry. I looked at her, my only granddaughter, once my small, enthusiastic kitchen helper who used to stand on a stool, stirring grits with both tiny hands, her face etched with serious concentration. I nodded slowly. "It hurt, baby," I said, the words heavy with memory. It truly did. She stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Can I stay?" I didn't answer right away. Then, I pulled out a fresh plate, handed it to her, and said, "Go on, get you some of that pound cake before Eleanor devours it all." She smiled, a wobbly but profoundly grateful curve of her lips, and quietly joined the circle. But I didn't hug her. Not yet. That was something she'd have to earn back, slowly, patiently. At the close of the evening, Ethan kindly offered to drive me home. I sat in the front seat, the bouquet of roses cradled in my lap, watching the sun dip low, painting the rooftops in glorious shades of fiery orange and soft lavender. He glanced at me and asked, "Was today better than last year, Miss Evelyn?" I looked out the window, a gentle breeze stirring the wisps of hair around my face, and whispered, "It wasn't just better. It was mine." When we arrived home, I stood on the porch for a long time, the wind cool but gentle, caressing my skin like a silent blessing. I gazed out at the quiet street and pondered how far I had journeyed, how much I had reclaimed. Then I walked inside, changed into my softest robe, and made myself a soothing cup of tea. I didn't check my phone. I didn't glance to see if Michael had finally texted. I simply sat at my kitchen table, alone, and smiled. Not because I was bursting with happiness, but because I was whole. For years, I had poured out my love for them. Now, I was giving myself peace. And that, truly, was the most priceless birthday gift I had ever received.